Okay.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and let's go down to that end and on my right and start with Sammy with an introductions.
Sure, Sammy with the Home Builders Association.
Linda Klebe, member at large.
John Gonquin with the Planning Commission.
Jim Johnson, Fargo School Board.
John Strand, City Commission.
Phil Mahoney, Mayor Fargo.
Mike Redlinger, City of Fargo staff.
Sam McDonald, member at large.
Okay, thanks, everybody, for attending, and we'll just go right on to the agenda. If anybody has any changes or additions to the agenda, if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second, Jim and John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay. We'll go to public comment if there's anybody in the audience that would like to have any public comment. All right, our next item will be Nicole, will this be your Tia? TBDG home updates.
Good afternoon, commissioners. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the 5-year HUD plan kickoff. I'm sure many of you have heard that we're going into our 2020-2024 5-year plan process. So last month we hired TDA Consulting to assist in the development of that plan. So that includes our 5-year plan. Within that is also the 2020 plan and the assessment of fair housing, which is something we should be updating every time we do a 5-year plan. So we issued a request for those qualifications on August 5th, and it was approved by City Commission on September 9th. And we're really excited to work with this group. They've been very good throughout the nation. They have a great reputation with HUD, a great deal of experience in developing these required HUD documents and the assessment of fair housing documents that we have to do. So I'm just going to kind of go through their scope of work. It was a pretty big document, but there are 5 major areas in their scope of work. So the phases, first is orientation and consultation, assessment, plan writing, public comment, and data entry. So right now we are in the orientation and consultation coordination kind of phase. So they're becoming familiar with Fargo. They're looking at our old studies and our old plans that we've had within the last 5 years. We've been visiting with them over the phone. They're also conducting stakeholder phone interviews that they started in September. And this November, in the first week of November, we're going to be doing focus groups. So they'll actually be in town and they're going to host a housing, a residential, a services, and an economic development focus group. So we're pretty excited about that. I think that will really help with the needs assessment portion of this project. And then the next phase is the assessment, which begins in November. So they're going to be doing a number of research and data analysis on housing, homelessness, and those services, things that come out of those focus groups and their research and census data and whatnot. And then they'll get into the plan writing phase, then the public comment, and then finally the data entry phase, which is really kind of nice because they're going to actually import or input all the data right into the HUD online system, which is something we would normally have to do. So we're looking forward to having them do that. And all of this is due by March 15th so that we can submit it and be ready for our May 1st through April 30th program year 2020 with a brand new 5-year plan. So that's really, really exciting. And so within that 5-year plan, there's that 2020 plan that I was telling you about. And the project solicitation, you'll see in your packets, there's a memo that went out last week kind of describing the changes that we'll be looking at this year instead of what we've done in the past with that application project or process. So TDA will be assisting in the 2020 plan and the selection of projects because they'll be so familiar with the needs that we're seeing within our community. And the process will be simplified. There'll be shorter proposals rather than the longer applications. I've heard from a lot of applicants that that takes a lot of time. So when I've talked to a few of them about this proposal concept, they get really excited about it. And we were thinking that these proposals would be reviewed and prioritized by staff and TDA based on their needs assessment. And then once we prioritize those, we would present them to a CD subcommittee, kind of like last year. And up to 5 of those top candidates may be asked to present at a public meeting. And at this public meeting, we would hope to see city commissioners and you commissioners at that meeting so you could ask questions directly to those proposals or the, organizations giving the proposals. And then that would follow shortly thereafter with a selection process, and then that would be tied into our HUD 5-year plan and then that 1-year plan, and that's how it would be brought forward, like our normal process where we come to CD, present the plan, you have an action, you move on it, and then same with City Commission. So that's kind of a really quick overview of what we're going to be doing in the next 6 months, and we're really excited about it, and I'm just wondering, do you guys have any questions about that process?
At all? Comments?
Sounds exciting.
It's good that you find this exciting.
Yes, it is.
You need somebody that really dives in and gets the language and appreciates it, and you do a good job at that, Tia.
Thank you.
Have you been here about a year now, year and a half?
Yep, it was a year on August 1st.
Getting our traction. Anybody else then? Okay, let's go on to our next report. Thank you.
Okay, I'll also be doing the next one on the HUD project update. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview of some of those higher spending, bigger spending type projects that we've been working really hard on in the last 12 months. So we have talked to you once about the YouthWorks project. So they were able to acquire a new building to shelter youth who are homeless. They're going to be doing a couple of rehabs to it, mostly cosmetic, and their hope is to get people in there within the next couple of months. So that's a really exciting thing that added 2 homeless beds to our community. And the other one that is really exciting is Washington Elementary. They added a new accessible playground to their what side is it? The east side of their school. So that's really neat too. So if you ever get a chance, take a swing by that school and you'll see a whole new playground. That was something we did with our funds. It was very fun watching all the kids go and play on it. They were just waiting as it was getting ready to be done. So it's really rewarding. Also, we are finalizing a rehab at Fraser and starting one at the Gladys Ray Shelter. So the Fraser one is from 2018, but that's finally done, and they're doing some kitchen upgrades to help with their state licensure for their kitchen area, whatever the Department of Health must require. So they were able to do some upgrades there. And we're just starting at the Gladys Ray Shelter with the scope of work. We're working with Brock Morrison and Jan on that, so that's kind of an exciting one too. A lot of other shelters in the neighborhood in our community are really excited that we're able to assist Gladys Ray, because it's kind of it's a shelter that all the other shelters rely on. So that's a really good one to be spending these funds on. And then we also acquired 2 properties for Habitat to develop. You may have seen the one up at 702 2nd Avenue North. That was a burnt out fire project, or a firehouse. It was vacant. Approximately 1 year after that fire, we tore it down. And that was just by chance. It was kind of interesting looking at the fire report and then realizing demo day was actually 1 year later. So that's pretty quick moving with federal funds. And now Habitat will build a home there. And 1529 10th Avenue South was a vacant lot. So that is kind of by the elementary school that's over there at Carl Benn. So they'll build on that one too. So they have about 3 years to develop projects there. Those are very exciting projects also. And then finally, we're working, and this is the most recent one that you guys probably kind of have fresh in your minds, is the BSI and Jesse Craig projects for the Affordable Senior Housing Development. So we're really getting into the weeds on those ones, trying to set those projects up right now. And I imagine the next time I come back to report on what we've been working on, this one will have moved to the top of the list, and we'll be able to say, hey, we've done this, and I'll be just as excited. That's everything.
Yeah, and maybe Jim, as a member of the school board, I remember when the playground project surfaced, and it was, at first I thought, an interesting twist in the application of these funds. I came around to realize that's a great use of those funds for a neighborhood that might not have the equipment available and the availability to upgrade. Did that have any impact on the school district, or do we have any more opportunity, or was that just a one-time thing, or will that be an opportunity for other neighborhood schools to do the playgrounds with community development block grants?
Well, we're certainly open to any and all playgrounds that you guys would like to get involved with, and I, on behalf of the school board, do want to thank all the efforts that were put in. It's a great facility, getting lots of use. At this point in time, I don't know that there's another playground scheduled to be considered, but we have playgrounds scheduled on a calendar rotation for upgrades. So if there's excess money, give us a call.
A question, is that still to a degree done by the PTAs and or not, or?
Not so much anymore.
Okay.
One of the problems, just background for everybody, it used to be that we actually had a partnership going with the Park District, where the PTA, the Park District, and the school district would each pay 1/3 of the cost. Because obviously they're used outside of just for school purposes, hence the park board. Historically, there are some schools that have very strong PTAs, raise a lot of money. There are other schools, quite frankly, where that's not the case. So we as a school district kind of said to the PTA, use your funds for other purposes. We're going to take on this responsibility. We think playgrounds are a necessary part, especially for elementary buildings. We still do partner with the park board from time to time, and they're a great partner. But this was like manna from heaven for the Washington neighborhood. So again, thank you from the school board.
Okay, any other questions or comments, feedback for Tia's update on 2019 projects? All right, we'll continue on, and I need to go back in the agenda, if everybody would bear with me. I've overlooked approving the minutes, item number 3. So if somebody could move to, or first I'll ask, are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Jim, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Michael. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, minutes can be posted. Now we'll go on to item number 6, and Nicole.
Yeah, so item number 6, just to kind of pick up where Tia left off, in if we think about the revenue that comes into the Community Development Division, it's primarily the HUD dollars, and then you'll know the Social Service Fund. So in the past 2 years ago, you'll remember we had one application, and that goes at large to the community outreach, and it's usually kind of a database, a listserv of our networks asking for applications. Last year, we split apart those applications, one for social service funds and one for HUD funds. It became a little complicated to have the two separated, and as we worked with our social service funds community, our committee, came into we heard some responses from that process. I was in front of you last time we met to talk about a different method, and as such, just to confirm that method that we would like to embark on for 2020 is in your packet was a memo that Tia sent out to our listserv of community members, basically just asking folks to kind of hang tight, if you will, until we can get this community needs assessment. We're really excited about the community needs assessment that Tia was just talking about with the TDA, that consultant through really engaged focus groups and through individual phone calls and interviews. And we'll send you those dates or those focus groups. So if you want to come or be part of any of that process, we'd be glad to have you. And through that, we expect the initial results of that needs assessment to be out in early January. And then that's going to give us the tools to start to set up a strategic plan for our community development division and some focus areas on the social service funds. And so we've asked again, our community to kind of hang tight until we can get those needs focused, and then we can more fine tune our application process and work with the social service funds committee, the mayor's office, and the city commission as part of that process. So I don't know if we necessarily need any action on that, but if you are not in support of this process, or if you are in support and want to discuss, staff is certainly open to that discussion.
Okay, any questions, comments, feedback? All right. Next topic, Nicole. This is a fun one.
Yeah, so this is a fun topic, and I wish we had some more graphics for you because I know a lot of narrative is a little boring. But so we're lucky to have Commissioner Strand and Commissioner Grinberg and John Gunkelman and Jan Alford Stewart, former Planning Commission Chair, serve on a subcommittee to help us select a consultant for our core neighborhood plan. So we had over 13 applications for our core neighborhood plan, and roughly we have set aside $300,000 in budget to work on a core neighborhood plan. I know we were in front of you about 2 months ago talking about the range of geographic area, and we had fantastic submittals. We narrowed it down to 3 that came in for an in-person interview. And we had Camiris from Chicago, we had Interboro from Brooklyn, New York, and then we had CZB out of Alexandria, Virginia. The committee selected CZB as the group that we'd like to work with, and so we're in the process right now kind of scoping that work. When we get that scope of work, we'll send that to you just as a FYI and to keep you close to the process. We very much will want the Community Development Committee close to this process. And one of the things that set them apart from the other teams is trying to get into the cause of some of the quality of life issues we're experiencing in our core neighborhoods, as opposed to maybe some of what we might respond to as symptoms. And so unfortunately, the cause and digging into data and stuff sometimes is not very glamorous. And so one of the work that they're going to start with right away is doing a citywide analysis so that they have a comparison against that citywide analysis against the individual neighborhood. So we'll be able to kind of gauge, kind of some maybe issues that might be happening in neighborhoods relative to the city as a whole, and cross-compare between neighborhoods as well. So we like this aspect as a database that the city can use for future work. And then the way they approach their work is with steering committees. And so they would like to set aside each neighborhood to have their own steering committee. In the history that they've had in the past is usually there's a number of citizens who want to be part of this process. And so they'll help us kind of gauge that process and maybe put some qualifications on, because we're going to want people that aren't shy about engaging in homework and process and discussion, and kind of some boots on the ground on some assessments. And each of these neighborhoods would have a steering committee of around 6 to 7 people. Then each geographic area, say north side, mid side, and south side, would have a kind of next level of steering committee, maybe members of those representing, and then a greater steering committee for the kind of whole project. And the question that came on, and maybe Commissioner Strand or John can express this, but the question that came up from time to time again, as we look at the complexity of this project, is how do we approach the uniqueness and characteristics of each neighborhood while still thinking about the whole. So knowing that some comments and kind of engagement from the Madison neighborhood is going to have maybe some different impact than our feedback than maybe some comments and feedback of the Washington neighborhood or Jefferson neighborhood. So we do very much want to understand the unique distinction between each neighborhood. This will have a strong housing focus. And we believe, I think, again, what set this committee apart, or this selection apart from the other 2 candidates is, so it's probably less of an urban design focus, and which is a little unique for us, a little different from us, but we do think that urban design piece comes next after we kind of figure out the causes and the data and maybe actionable steps that can help impact our housing programs. As a staff person, my number one concern is probably the status of our single-family housing and how we can stabilize that and brace that with maybe more structure and stability and programming, and whether that's through federal funds or local funds or nonprofits. And so they're a wealth of information when it comes to tools like that. So that's just kind of a summary from the staff perspective. I'm sure Commissioner Strand or John, if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Why don't you chime in, John?
Well, this one really excites me only because we get a lot of projects before the Planning Commission where we could use some guidance, particularly in the core neighborhoods, and any insight, and also to make the neighborhoods feel like they're part of the decision-making process. And, the one thing I hate is the day after a planning commission meeting, and we thought we reached a compromise, and the next day, the neighborhood is sort of throwing the process under the bus. And I'm excited that we can maybe get some buy-in from the neighborhoods, plus I think it will also identify in some of the other neighborhoods. Of course, we're most familiar with the Roosevelt neighborhood, but some of the other neighborhoods we haven't had a lot of issues with, and it'll be fun to see the people that come to the surface to kind of be those steering groups, and so that when we do have an issue come up, we'll have a contact network to, you know, work through the issues with. So I'm excited. I mean, some days after, you don't want to go open a paper the day after. It's kind of like a commission meeting, Mayor. But I think it's hopefully going to be a well worth, very different dynamics in the 9 neighborhoods. But it's going to be fun to see how it all comes together.
And joining up on that, we had some voices from the neighborhoods participating in this process that were very much involved, and we had time and space dedicated to them to ask the candidates questions and to query them and learn more from them. So I think that set the tone that we're going to continue forward, and that they're going to have a voice and a place at the table in this process, which is really important. All the 3 finalists were very different and unique, and any one of them would have done a great job for Fargo. It's great we're going to have this plan coming our way. And last few years, through your leadership and the city's leadership, we're getting a lot of strategic planning caught up, like the school board at one point needed to catch up on strategic plans. Well, we're doing that now too, and there's an immense value to that. And while I'm mentioning the school, it's kind of interesting. Of course, it goes without saying, but in our community, our neighborhoods are named after the schools. So that relationship here in our community is very, very important, and will play a role going forward. The neighborhood elementary schools and the middle schools and the high schools and in the lay of the land, and I'm expecting our school system and district will have a role in this as well going forward, and a voice in that. It's going to be fun, Nicole. It'll be good to see your team have this document and roadmap going forward when it's all said and done, so that you have that guidance from the broader community.
Yeah, this time next year, we'll have a 5-year consolidated plan, some recommendations on the land development code, and hopefully the preliminary results of the core neighborhood planning process. So hopefully we don't burn you all out on a lot of long-term projects, but we're really excited because that will help catch us up to getting us some tools for proactive engagement and coordination with you all, as well as our public at large. So we're really excited for the support on this.
Any questions, comments on this? Okay, we'll go on to our next item, and I had asked to have this topic put on our agenda today. I can't say I'm an expert at what's happening in our mobile home parks, but it's in the public view right now. There's some ownership changes, I believe, unfolding that will have an impact on maybe several hundred families. And I think, so we're just going to open this topic up, and we'll call on staff for some guidance here shortly. But bottom line, there's a lot of families that's their affordable housing. And I don't know what, if any, the city's role can be in advocating or intermediating or anything to be there to bolster up the housing support of the families affected. But let's just move forward from that, and maybe, Nicole, if you folks could update us with what information you have.
Sure.
And we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do, maybe just to kind of back up of what staff knows at this point in time, and we know much research needs to happen, but it came to our attention that there was going to be a tenant education meeting, and there's 2 mobile home parks, one off of 25th Street in the Jefferson neighborhood, and one off of University north across from the airport, and that have changed into different ownership. And with that ownership, what we're hearing is that I think many tenants there were on a month-to-month lease. And what we're hearing anyway is that the new landlord is asking for a year-long commitment, raising rents, as well as if they're choosing not to do a year-long lease, then they can go month to month, but then of course they're subject to rising rents. And so the two of my staff members, and I believe Bruce Tarleson from the inspections office had a staff person or himself attend, where where we just kind of were witness to the tenant education, so we could learn more about what was happening. We weren't even aware this was happening until the commission received an email kind of alert notice. And so at this point in time, other than what staff has seen in the news and through this meeting, the tenant education was organized, what we think is from a kind of a mobile home association organization that was looking out on behalf of the tenants. And so I think maybe a lawyer that was part of that education. And in talking a little bit with Mike Redlinger, you know, one of the things that we can do as staff is you know, potentially reach out to the owners to learn more about their long-term strategies or what their options are or what they're thinking if they would share that with us. I believe the owners are out of Utah, and so, you know, of course, it's the right not to share that with us. But then also, I know Bruce and our city attorney, you know, we've had discussions over the years on how we can make changes to some of our mobile home ordinances, kind of our inspection rights and our access rights as city entities are a little different than they are for elsewhere in the city. And so part of that is state law change, part of that is local ordinance change. But with that, we're just at the tip of the knowledge expert. You know, we're definitely not knowledge experts, and we would need to do some research and learn more about what we can do. Certainly vouchers and connecting them to our service providers as kind of a networker, we can do that with the residents. What we're hearing, of course, is, you know, the residents are getting evicted into homelessness or not able to move their, you know, with a trailer. It's our mobile home, you know, the movability of that is, and locations and suggestions for them to locate at is at least not, nothing comes to immediate mind within the city of Fargo limits. But that's where we're at the staff level, and we'd certainly take your recommendations or guidance or suggestions on other tools that we might need to investigate.
What's everybody's thoughts on this? Let's have a dialogue. How important is this? What should we do? Any ideas on how to approach it? Any suggestions, Mayor?
Well, Nicole, I think that we're gonna have to do is, we can't do rent control, we can't control the private buyer on this issue. So what's gonna happen is you're gonna have people who don't have affordable housing. And I think what we should explore at least is what options do we have for those people, so at least we'd have it on a list, whether Matt Pike has some areas, whether we have some other areas other in town that can we get done beyond shelter. I think you have to offer them something, because otherwise they're gonna be out on the street. And John, I don't know what their business model is. I don't know if their intent is that everybody leaves and then they take it all apart and build an apartment complex. I haven't seen what these owners ultimately do, but it doesn't sound like they're trying to keep tenants. I mean, they have.
Well, I think that would be our biggest fear. Both of the pieces of property, you know, if you look at 25th Street, that's prime real estate butting up against 25th Street. And I think we've all, even before this happened, I think I remember having a discussion once or twice at the planning department, what's going to happen. And of course, with the Ponyland area up north, we know that the minute that would become available, it would probably be bought up by a developer. And so I think the fear, it's been interesting, as soon as this came on the spotlight, as I've been driving around town, you forget about the ones in West Fargo. As you go to, I was at City Hall in West Fargo last week, and I kind of remembered one of my employees actually lived in the park across the street to the east, and they're surprisingly big. You only see the start of them along 4th Street or 9th Street in West Fargo. And then the other one on 42nd, they fill a housing need. And I think the mayor hit it on if they get forced out of those places, we are gonna be put in a predicament that, trying to find housing for them.
And that West Fargo trailer park is also one of the ownership changes, I believe.
Is
by
that
the
big one, and was
city.
that
At
the
least
other?
the one north of City Hall there. I'm not sure about east.
Yeah, it's all one.
It's all one,
that all
both
one?
north and east? I guess
There's
you're right,
three?
it's on both sides of the road.
Does anybody know, and I'm not sure Nicole or who would know this, somebody suggested this isn't under our authority, that it's the county? Is that the case? Do we know that or not, or that?
I guess I'd be curious what you mean by authority. So, I think at a high level, and I guess at a high level, whenever you have a landlord-tenant issue, that's a private matter, not a public matter. Granted, there's different conditions here, of course, but, and so that's where we're kind of out of our, other than, if we have evidence of discrimination or some other housing protection measures that we can use as tools. But in terms of tools in our toolbox, I guess, I would look to our, city administration for guidance in that, our city attorney for guidance in that, and we would need some time for research. But the properties in the city of Fargo, so I think there's probably environmental health concerns. And so if we think about code enforcement as a whole, which Bruce Tarlson's office is, the expert here, but, you have health, fire, police, inspections, planning, that meet, I know I'm forgetting a few, but they meet quarterly right now, or more frequently if needed, but they coordinate their enforcement and code enforcement mechanisms. And so, regarding these properties, it'd probably be appropriate to have these groups huddle to see what kind of tools they have for enforcement practices. I use that lightly because we're not trying to do enforcement for the purpose of impacting the residents. A couple years ago, we had some enforcement issues related to just, other quality of life concerns. And so that's where I only say, in terms of tools we have at a public realm, would be enforcement mechanisms. When it comes to tenant, landlord issues, I don't know if we have a whole lot of tools in our toolbox.
Bruce, do you have anything to join in with us, Bruce Tarlson? You might have some additional information that might help us.
Of some.
Okay.
It is a different type of property. There is some zoning in the Land Development Code for mobile home parks, but the attorneys have sort of said those are for new mobile home parks. They're not really enforceable on existing. Mobile homes are not in the building code. So when we try and take enforcement for the National Property Maintenance Code, it doesn't really work on a mobile home. They are done under DOT standards. It's actually a trailer. So the codes are different. What I know that we are doing currently is every 6 months, the health department organizes an inspection of all mobile home parks. So they get the fire department, us. We all go out and inspect all mobile home parks at one time. We send a report, and the health department is required to follow up on that. And we do that twice a year. That's all we do. We don't do rental inspections. We don't do building permits. Under the authority the health department received, we are supposed to look at the state codes for mobile home parks. We've attempted to write hundreds of permits, and we're not able to. The requirements are so strict for sheds, entries, all that. It's very hard to write a permit. I think we've written one or two in the last few years. Garages aren't allowed, carports. They've been constructed for decades. So the neighbors all look at the neighbors, say, they have that, I want that. But it's not in the state law, it's not in our land development code. So we have a real hard time in mobile home parks. I have a feeling that many of them are rental right now, and I think they're in pretty rough shape. I've been in some myself, We actually did the United Way campaign, assist seniors, and we went in 2 of them. And it's tough to see. We went in and cleaned them up, but that was a rental, and that is one of the people that was not affected by the current purchase. So it will be interesting to see the direction that both those 2 that were purchased were. I heard that 2 were also purchased in West Fargo.
2.
Same, yeah. So
4
there's 4 in
altogether?
town, yeah.
Okay. I'm curious if there's an appetite or desire on this commission or where in the city reign of authority, where is the proper place for this discussion to vet what our avenues are, if anything, to do? Is it community development, or is it city council or commission, or does anybody have any guidance on this? I just really sincerely believe this topic needs to be vetted and talked about. We have hundreds of families affected, more than my hometown. And I remember when the ownership changed over south of Interstate, where there were 89 families where Catalyst is now, maybe 10 or more years ago. And I remember there were 89 families being affected then. And I remember at that time, most of us in the community couldn't even identify, because they had a lawyer representing the buyer. We couldn't even tell you who the buyer was at that time. Couldn't even name the buyer. And yet there's more people in my hometown being dislocated. But, and I'm not sure we have the authority or not, but I just can't imagine that these folks would have not have a sense that we're caring or trying to see what we can do, if anything.
I believe we do have some authority because it is a property inside the city. We do provide services. We provide police service, water service, sewer service, but it's looked at as one property, not individuals. So we deal with the owner of the court and look at them as a management company responsible for the entire park, not as individual owners.
Anybody have any experience with anything like this at all? Michael?
Yeah, some experience, limited, but like Bruce, like Nicole have said, these are really complex issues that you almost have to establish a baseline of who is the ownership, who owns units and is just doing lot rent, who owns their unit and is able to move it. You have, in some cases, developers and property owners that own the trailers and just rent out. You have to kind of baseline, just understand kind of what's going on. And to Bruce's point, we do have a lot of authority. We possess a lot of authority, but yet there are some limits to that as well. And so I think that kind of stepping back with legal and just providing perhaps this commission, it would be a good place to start. This committee would just, this is what we know, this is what we can do, this is what we can't do, I think would be a good point. There is a private property element to this, and a property rights element to it. In some cases, having dealt with this years and years ago, there are some of the owners of these structures that prefer just to kind of stay as is, don't desire to, move or have improvements to these parks because it's allowed for affordability, where they're at in that place. Then there are others who do desire to get out and do want to be in, apartment buildings and other multifamily products. So it's a continuum of renters and owners and a variety of issues. So I think that the best we can do right now is just baseline that for you, draft some observations in a memo and share that with this group. But this is as good a place as any to start a conversation.
Well, Nicole, I don't know who would do this, but we really need to know what we can do or not do. So can we do rent control? It would have to be the will of the commission to do that. Can you do that? Can you not? I mean, and it goes into the same dialogue. We don't do rent control on apartment buildings. They're going to suddenly hop into trailer parks to try to do that, John. And it's kind of a question, what do we have the power to do or not to do, and what's the appetite on the other side of that? And John, just for the record, because not everybody knows where you were born, how big a town is that?
A couple hundred right now.
Couple hundred, so 200. So you are right. I mean, when we get 89 families affected, that is part of our community, and we have to look into that and see what we can do. I think the concern that Michael is bringing up is that, is there anything we can do? Or do we just watch it go by and, to John's point, somebody gets all the renters out and builds an apartment complex, and does a private property owner have that right? They may, but we still have to address what are we going to do with those families. And I think the bigger issue is what you're talking about, is we may displace people out of the community that are really part of our community, and we have to figure out what to do. So I don't know, Nicole, where to land at, but I think we need to have education of what can or can we not do, and what can we entertain as a commission to help these people out. So is there somebody on your team, Bruce's team, who do you want to task those things with, John, and come to us and give a report?
Yeah, I think there's two components of this. One is, I'd say, the social, the social piece, and one is the legal piece. And so I think that the social piece, what we can do is connect with some of the housing providers and see what they might have in their toolkit. I'm thinking the Fargo Housing Authority, what they might have access to for vouchers, et cetera. And in terms of the legal piece, I would defer to our city attorney, and I could reach out to our city attorney and get his professional opinion on what we can do in terms of, I'm not aware of any programs we can do for rent control, et cetera, without ordinance crafting, but that's certainly in the purview of you and the commission. So I can reach out to Eric and just see what he recommends and provide that back to you in a statement or a report or directly. And given that the City Commission works a little faster than the CD committee, no offense, but meets a little bit more frequently. If it makes sense to bring that directly to the City Commission, we can work with
Well, I mean, the question is, do you do vouchers? So you can't do rent control, but can you do vouchers? Is there some other mechanism you could do
and
to
that's going to
help
be all
out?
under the Housing Authority.
And then we don't know if it's 200 families or whether it's 10 to 20. Well, there's a different breadth of what we would have to get involved with. If it was 10 families had trouble, and we could try to find some help somewhere, John. So I think that's kind of the questions we're asking, but there's no focal point. So the Commissioner Strand's problem is that we don't even know how many people, we've heard a lot of turmoil, but sometimes people grumble and then they pay the rent. I mean, it's kind of a goofy deal, but they say they can't afford it and somehow they can afford it. So we don't know the depth of how many people this involves. And I know talking to Mayor Dardis, the same concern is there's a lot of affordable housing in West Fargo. A lot of those people have lived there for years. And are they going to be driven out of the community? So maybe coordinate as well with West Fargo, because we both face those issues.
Sam?
I would be interested, since this is happening and it's moving, are the community services that are necessary for these folks right now available, and are they ready, and are they sharing any big gaps that they're seeing? Is there anything that our community partners are saying, whoa, this is a big thing we need to deal with right now and could use some help with? Or are they managing with the volume that they are seeing already?
Yeah, we can certainly reach out to them. I'm guessing what I hear on a monthly basis from them is everybody's strapped and could use more staff and use more resources. So everybody's at their max. And from what I hear, they're barely keeping up with the homeless numbers. I mean, I think everybody's doing good, but they're not stable by any means. And so, with that in common, I would just say, in terms of the Community Development Committee, it's hard for us to be in a reactionary state versus a proactive state. And, our HUD, the money we work with on a regular basis is HUD money, which, as Tia was just mentioning, revolves over a course of a 24 months. So in terms of our direct service providers, what we can do is reach out to our networks. That includes the people in housing, the people in social services, the people in homelessness, and just connect and see what they're experiencing, and give you a quick status update based on that. So we can put some feelers out for sure, and report back. But yeah, I'm guessing they're going to be short.
Okay, Jim?
Just a couple of thoughts. First of all, this is near and dear to the school board's heart, because we're talking about some affordable housing that actually includes a fair number of Fargo Public School students. If by chance this new owner's plan is to raise the mobile home park, either develop or sell the land, and I think you're spot on, 25th Street would probably be the first one they'd go after. That's one set of issues that I think hopefully we as a community can find some tools to work with. It's another one if they just intend to raise the rent, as they've been saying, and put money back into improving these trailer parks, which is, I think, what their official statement has been so far. 2 or 3 thoughts. Could the city provide grants of some type, or perhaps loans, much like we have the Neighborhood Revitalization Loan Program, to help people afford the cost of moving these mobile homes? While they may be mobile, many of them have been on the same site for decades, and moving them will probably require some significant expenditure. But for families that really probably don't have that savings in the bank and may not have the borrowing capacity with area lenders. So could we look at some of the other tools we have to help those people that might want to relocate to a different park, assuming, and this is part 2, there is a different park? I'm not so sure there is. There might be some spots up by Edgewood, whatever that trailer park is, that's way up on the north side. They started clearing that out about a decade ago, and then they stopped. So they have a lot of empty lots. I don't know what their intention is. I think the Van Radens may own that particular park. But, and I'm not up on this at all, maybe somebody from the city is, but I keep seeing stories where communities are building tiny house communities to take care of their homeless population, their disabled vets. So I'm wondering, is that a viable consideration? To have the city actually use some land or acquire some land and make it a mobile home park for these displaced residents, especially if they actually displace the entire park, as was potentially one of the things that could happen. So I don't know if we've researched as a community yet what's going on with these tiny home movements, but I gotta believe when those are going in, the city is deeply involved. Maybe there's private developers that see profit in that, but I wonder if those aren't more community-based programs. I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head.
Grand Forks is just announcing a tiny home project of some sort. There's pros and cons. So Nicole, you're getting lots of topics thrown at you in your department here. How many folks are affected? Are there any options for them to go to now? You know, is there any support to help them move if there were that option? Any protections potentially for the people who are renting?
I'm going to chime in now.
Linda.
Some of these houses are going to be too old to move. The other mobile home parks won't take them because they're too old, they're past. So then those homeowners' best choice would be to stay where they are. And so then it might be a rent help, like from some of our other social services areas. I don't think this particular company is going to vacate them, because their model, which very few companies go into the mobile home park business anymore, because it's kind of expensive to start up and it takes a long time to fill up. And so I think they're just gonna vacate houses that are abandoned and replace them with new houses and sell them and follow their own model. They're just gonna sell the land, and then the homeowner is gonna have to take care of their own home. My other concern though was with some of these people who are really low income, who've been under the radar because they've been taking care of themselves. You know, they're spending way more than they should be on just their rent. So how are they paying for heat and medicine and food and all those other things? So, but I think the mobile home park up north that you're thinking of, they might not take a home that's so old that they're gonna say, no, it has to be at least newer. And then on another point, I think the tiny houses are really too tiny. That in the long term, they're not really a good habitable choice for people, when about the same amount of investment can get them a slightly larger, more average, normal home. You know, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 400, 600 square feet, bigger than that. Because sometimes they're just too small, and then you can't live in them because everything's piled up. So we're seeing the flip side of that on the tiny house.
People don't like to be that close to their husband, or what?
No.
Dan Madler, do you have anything to add to this conversation at all from Beyond Shelter? Just thinking, I'm curious. We have a resource in our audience maybe that could add to this conversation.
I don't think I have anything to really add other than it is so complex. And it just goes down to the affordability of all the communities. Every community has an affordability problem or a need or demand. And it's a matter of what is the strategic strategy and how we're going to address that, prioritize that, and go after that, realizing you're not going to be able to serve everybody. And then during the course of executing the plan, things are going to bubble up like this mobile home park. Everybody's kind of speculating what are they going to do. Nobody knows what they're going to do. But the people living there in that unit have been living there for several years. They're probably living in substandard housing. That problem has been there for several years. This just hasn't been talked about. And so by talking about it and strategizing, it's just maybe having the conversation. It now has boiled up, but the resources aren't available. They're not there. From a production perspective, what we do, we develop. We can only put so many new houses in service per year on an annual basis. And so the rental assistance, I can almost guarantee that the housing authority is going to say we're at capacity. We don't have extra vouchers, and the vouchers we have, there's a 2-year wait list. There's maybe 2,000 people on the wait list. And maybe we can give them a preference, maybe not. But then if you do give them a preference, it's very complex, and I don't have anything to offer other than to kind of quantify the scale of it.
Okay, and thank you. Anybody else? Any thoughts, questions? Mike?
Yeah, John, just one other thing that I think we can do is just broadly give an assessment of current code enforcement activities from Bruce's office, kind of age and condition of units. Linda's point is well taken, and I've seen this work in a couple of co-op models. Co-ops that have had capital to work with have been able to remove older homes, either bring other new homes to the site or used homes that are in better repair and condition to be able to keep the housing in place. Jim's point, keeping that kid in that attendance area for an elementary school, or consolidate bad code enforcement problems and try to just deal with clearing out, say, a half block and then keeping better units together so there's stability for the residents that remain, but then assistance for the people that we've just declared that's substandard housing. We really need to help you relocate to something safer, something that's not going to cause health concerns or problems in long term. So I think as a part of our white paper, we need to provide some level of assessment of condition, and not that we've been in and out of every one of these units, but just give an overall assessment of what we see and the kinds of calls that we do get there. Because I think that's going to be instructive just to kind of tell us what's happening out there in the field. And then also talk to the owner, and perhaps they do have a plan and an income stream to be able to replace units. And from a stability standpoint, that would be a good thing to take care of some of the real dilapidated properties, get them removed. And if you bring back safe housing that provides stability for that family and for that young person to stay in that attendance area, then that's a good thing, for the community. Because that point is not lost, that these are affordable units that are not easily replaced in the market, either with stick-built apartment buildings or other mobile homes.
So you've gotten some sense from us, some ideas of where our thinking is going, Nicole, and to your folks in your department. I guess where I'm thinking, hearing this is we gather information, we learn more. I'd be suggesting we maybe be prepared to come back to the next community development meeting in a month. However, if it looks to you, if in your studies you find that there's a sense of urgency or a sense of action or discussion needed earlier, we could either convene the Community Development Committee again or take it right to the City Commission if that's needed. So we could leave that kind of up in the air as to what unfolds. But Plan B would be come back to Community Development unless there's an urgency to move it up further, faster. Does that make sense to everybody? It's just really important that the folks out there in our community, there's hundreds of families affected, that they know that we're wanting to learn what we can do. And we're eager to know if there's anything we can do. And we're willing to do what we can do if we find out there's something we can do. A question, Nicole, is does our land development code address any of this, or going forward, is that a topic to throw in their studies?
Yeah, I think definitely in the studies, both in the core neighborhood, it'll certainly be a topic in the core neighborhood plan. They take large geographic areas in our core neighborhoods plans, and just like Jim said, they are, the Jefferson neighborhood and, kind of a predominant feature in that neighborhood. But I think the land development code will talk to it. we, will have the needs assessment, and then I just want to kind of impress upon, I absolutely hear you on this being a need. I'm going to need resources outside my department to work on this. We have the consolidated plan due to the feds here in, less than 45 days, and so in terms of the outreach and the needs assessment. So we're pretty focused in our department, but so I'll be the primary contact. I'll adjust my work schedule to work on this and to work with Michael and the city attorney and Bruce and the police chief and fire chief on this to get an assessment and see what kind of resources and that we can connect to this on the we're going to probably need the attorney's help for connecting with the owner in terms of that aspect as well.
John, and I think West Fargo would like to join you on that as well, because the mayor has talked to me about it, so if you could involve anybody in their staff, Nicole, so you don't do all the work.
That'd be really great to partner with them. Anybody else? Where this goes, we don't know, but community development is one place. Our charge and our mission is to address poverty, to address affordable housing, to address homelessness. These all are potential outcomes for some folks, and if we can just kind of be aware of where things are going and what we can do, I think that'd be a good, prudent step for us. And thank you for, on a moment's notice, providing the information that we threw together for today's meeting. Anybody else? Okay. And winter's coming, so it's important that we know they're out roofs over their heads. On that note, we'll stand adjourned and meet again in a month. Thanks, everybody.